Here's something that might just flip your whole understanding of global missions.
Okay, go on.
It's this idea of reaching unreached peoples. That concept we often think of as, well, Western.
Right, yeah. Comes out of that Western mission thinking, traditionally.
Exactly. But it turns out it's had this huge impact, really reshaped theological education and mission work across Francophone Africa.
Mm.
And maybe even more surprising, it's actually ignited this vibrant missionary movement from those countries themselves.
That is interesting. It's a shift, definitely. So we're diving into how that happened based on Musa Bangoyok's work.
That's the plan. We're going to unpack how this whole thing took root and why it's, frankly, a pretty big deal globally.
It sounds like it. I mean, it flips the script, doesn't it? From being mission fields to becoming a mission force.
Precisely. So our mission for this deep dive, if you will, is to figure out how this unreached people's focus landed in Francophone Africa.
Okay.
We'll look at the key people, the institutions involved.
And the actual impact it had on training and sending missionaries out from there.
Exactly. And Bangoyok brings a lot to the table, his own student experiences, historical digging, looking at the main players.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
So where do we start? This whole unreached people's idea, where did it actually come from?
Well, the source points pretty clearly to Ralph Winter back when he was at Fuller School of World Mission.
Fuller, right. Bangoyok mentions Winter learned a lot just from listening to the students there, right?
Yeah.
Thousands from all over.
Yeah, exactly. And hearing all those different experiences, well, it led him to some, let's call them disturbing conclusions about how missions were typically done.
Disturbing how? What was the problem he saw?
It seems he noticed a major blind spot, what he called American melting pot assumptions.
Melting pot assumptions. What's that about in a mission context?
The idea was basically, you establish a church somewhere in a country, and the assumption was it would just naturally spread, like organically reach everyone, all the different ethnic groups, languages.
Okay, like ripples in a pond, it would just eventually get everywhere within that country.
Sort of, yeah. But talking to students, Winter realized that just wasn't happening. Tons of minority groups were being completely missed, isolated.
Because of cultural barriers.
Language barriers.
Things like that.
Exactly. He called it an overlooked dimension. These groups were like totally pioneer fields, but invisible if you had those melting pot glasses on.
Right. So the existing churches maybe weren't crossing those internal cultural lines as easily as people thought.
That seems to be the core of it. A major oversight, really.
And this insight, this wasn't just an academic thing for him, was it? It led to bigger shifts.
Oh, absolutely. His talk at the Lausanne conference back in '74, that's seen as like a watershed moment.
Really put unreached people groups onto the global mission agenda. It changed strategies quite a bit after that.
Definitely. And we should remember Fuller's role in this, too. He actually presented his big paper on it, The Task of Highest Priority, Cross-Cultural Missions, while he was still faculty there.
So the idea was born. It got a huge platform at Lausanne. But how did it make the jump specifically to Francophone Africa? That seems like the crucial step for our story.
Right. And this is where a specific institution comes into play. Bangui Evangelical Graduate School of Theology. FET, for short.
In the Central African Republic. Founded back in '77 by the Association of Evangelicals in Africa.
That's the one. It became really a premier place for training leaders across French-speaking Africa.
Denominations, Christian organizations, other schools.
Yeah.
A key hub.
Yeah. And apparently they didn't always have enough local African professors with doctorates, so they relied quite a bit on visiting faculty.
And one of those visitors was particularly important.
Enter Professor Nzash U. Lumeya. Bangoyok really highlights his role.
Lumeya.
Yeah.
Okay. What was his connection? How did he become this conduit for Winter's ideas?
Well, first off, he had actually been a student at Fuller himself, so he'd been directly exposed to Winter's thinking, to that whole environment.
So he got it firsthand.
Exactly. And he brought that passion with him when he came to teach at Bangui. Apparently, it didn't matter what subject he was teaching.
You bring it back to missions.
Always. Back to missions, back to the need to reach these unreached groups. Bangoyok says he was just incredibly passionate about it.
And it wasn't just talk, right?
Yeah.
I think the source mentioned he was actually involved.
Yeah, that's key. He wasn't just theoretical. He was actively working with the Bamenga Pygmy people who were considered unreached then.
Wow.
And he didn't just go alone. He'd take his students, local pastors, show them what it looked like on the ground.
That makes a huge difference, seeing it in action, not just hearing lectures.
Totally. And his influence spread further. He actually nudged a major denomination there in the CRR to start its own missiology institute.
A dedicated center just for mission training.
Yeah, specifically to train African missionaries. And he taught there too, on top of his work at Bangui.
This guy was busy.
Seems like it. And later, when he moved back to Kinshasa in the DRC, he founded an even bigger mission school. The Centre Universitaire de Missiologie offers master's level training. He also started the Fresno School of Mission.
So he was really planting seeds, creating structures for this vision to grow.
A real catalyst. And that connection back to Bangui. Why was that so strategically important?
Well, think about where Bangui's graduates ended up.
Right. Leading churches, organizations, schools all over Francophone Africa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when they graduated, they took that passion, that training Lumeya instilled with them. And Bangui itself was instrumental in setting up CTAF.
CTAF, remind me.
The Conseil d'Institution Théologique d'Afrique Francophone, basically the Council for Theological Schools in the region.
Okay.
And they developed a shared curriculum, heavily emphasizing mission studies, which is now used almost everywhere. The current leader of CTAF, Abel Njerario, former president of Bangui.
So Bangui acted like the central node, pushing out Lumeya's passion and this focus on unreached peoples through its graduates and through CTAF, like a distribution network for the idea.
That's a good way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't only Lumeya and Bangui, right? Other things were happening too.
Definitely. You mentioned the Lausanne gatherings earlier.
Yeah, those conferences had a big impact on attendees from Francophone Africa too. They heard winter, they got the vision, and they took it home.
Shared it with colleagues, in their churches.
Right. And Bangui points to René Didanso, working with the Association of Evangelicals in Africa. His work in Chad sounds pretty amazing.
Mobilizing people, right, starting in the early 90s.
Yeah, it led to this wave of evangelism and church planting, specifically targeting unreached groups there. Cameroon apparently saw similar developments.
So these weren't just ideas floating around in seminaries. They were hitting the ground, changing how people did ministry.
Absolutely. And then there's Dave Richards.
The missionary from New Zealand, based in Burkina Faso.
That's him. He played a key role too, organizing seminars specifically on unreached people groups.
Using French materials from the Perspectives movement, I read.
Exactly. Practical training. And a really significant result of all that was the Institut Missiologique du Sahel, the Sahel Institute of Missiology.
In Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. Started around 2003. Tell me about that one.
Well, it's pretty focused.
Yeah.
An intensive 9-month residential program.
For pastors and evangelists who already have some training?
Yeah, giving them specialized missiology instruction. And crucially, it includes several weeks of actual field experience, practical application.
So theory and practice combined.
Right. And the graduates, they're out there now, working among unreached groups. Some have even started similar training centers back in their own countries.
Wow. So you see this multiplication effect happening. From Winter's idea through people like Lumeya, initiatives like Richards, institutions like Bangui and the Sahel Institute, it's really building momentum.
It really is. You're seeing a genuine missionary movement taking shape, originating from Francophone Africa.
Which countries are really showing promise here?
Bangui lists quite a few. Benin, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Chad, CRR, DRC, Ivory Coast, Madagascar, Mali, Niger, Senegal, Togo, all seeing more activity in church planting among the unreached.
And it's remarkable thinking about Burkina Faso, a country facing huge economic challenges.
Yet they're sending missionaries out to Europe and Asia. It's quite something.
And that's a broader trend, isn't it? Since the 90s, more missionaries from across Francophone Africa heading to other parts of Africa, but also Europe, North America, Asia.
Yeah, the numbers are growing. So that initial idea, that Western concept, it's taken root, and now it's flowing outwards from Africa. It's a complete turnaround, really.
Truly inspiring. It shows real ownership of the global mission task. But this growth, it also creates new needs, right? Bangui talks about future training requirements.
He does, and it's a critical point. While there's a lot of training happening, most of it is at the diploma level, or even lower.
Not enough advanced study.
Exactly. There's a real lack of PhD programs in missiology within Francophone Africa.
And why is that so important now?
Well, you need highly qualified professors to teach the next generation. You need mission agency leaders with advanced strategic thinking. And crucially, you need researchers on the ground gathering current data about unreached peoples to guide the efforts effectively.
Right, so the strategies stay relevant and informed.
Plus, the existing leaders and professors, they also need pathways for further education, for advanced degrees to keep things moving forward.
So there's a bottleneck at the higher levels of training. Any signs of solutions?
There are some hopeful developments. Places like Fuller, William Carey International University, places still connected to Winter's legacy. They're starting to offer doctoral programs through distance education using cohort models.
Ah, so people can study together, support each other, but without having to relocate for years.
Exactly. And that could train a significant number of leaders. And think about the potential impact. Many French speakers in Africa are multilingual.
So they could work across linguistic divides, not just in Francophone areas, but globally.
Precisely. Bangui really sees Francophone Africa potentially becoming a major missionary sending force for the world. You asked about Europe and Asia?
Yeah, are they focusing only on African diaspora communities there, or?
It's a mix. Some do focus on diaspora, naturally, but there's also increasing engagement with the wider populations and their own experiences, often coming from multicultural contexts or minority groups themselves.
Gives them unique cross-cultural skills.
Often, yes. A different kind of insight, perhaps.
That's a powerful thought. And another piece of this puzzle seems to be theological education by extension, making training more accessible.
Absolutely. And interestingly, Winter himself was a big promoter of back at Fuller.
So training people outside the traditional seminary walls?
Yeah, bringing the education to where people are. It's been huge in Africa, especially for groups like the African independent churches, who might have been hesitant to send leaders to establish schools.
I saw that quote from Helena Huberty's, like the Bible going to the people, the book is the teacher, really emphasizes accessibility.
It does. And the Kimbanguist Church, with millions of members, is cited as a major beneficiary of models. It empowers vast numbers of people in their own contexts.
So has been vital, but even there, Bangui sees room for growth, right? Needs further development.
Definitely. The need now is to keep developing models, both online and the more traditional methods that are really sensitive to African ways of learning, African philosophies of education.
Not just importing Western models wholesale.
Right. And with internet access growing, even in rural areas, online has huge potential. But the schools and churches need to build effective ways to actually use it well.
And the ultimate goal isn't just about training pastors or specialists.
Yeah, the vision is broader. It's about equipping all mature Christians, wherever they are, to be part of God's mission in the world, not just the clergy.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We started with Ralph Winter's insights about unreached peoples.
Ideas that really shook up mission thinking globally.
And we saw how those ideas traveled, got transmitted effectively into Francophone Africa, thanks to key people like Professor Lumeya.
And vital institutions like Bangui, CITAF, the Sahel Institute.
Which all helped fuel this really dynamic, growing missionary movement that's now coming from French-speaking Africa.
And the takeaway for you, listening in, is really seeing how ideas can jump borders, how they can empower people in unexpected places.
Yeah, it really underlines how important it is to spot those overlooked needs, like Winter did, and the incredible power of focused education and training.
It's pretty humbling, actually, to see a concept framed in one culture get picked up, adapted, and lead to such a vibrant movement elsewhere.
Absolutely. Which kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Well, thinking about this history, what other perspectives, what new ideas or resources might be out there, maybe emerging from other parts of the world right now, that could reshape how we think about global engagement?
Yeah, what assumptions are we holding on to now, maybe unconsciously, that might be blinding us to new possibilities for working together and making an impact?
Good question. Something to definitely mull over after this deep dive.